Luckily, Cryptids and Critters is intended for mature audiences. Many of our topics may involve violent, sexual, or otherwise heavy themes that may be difficult for some listeners.
Welcome to Locally Cryptids and Critters, a podcast where we discuss various cryptids, monsters, and things that go bump in the night.
I'm Loki Lee, your resident armchair anthropologist and Scandinavian scholar.
And I'm Lee, your resident redneck and wannabe historian of Slavic and paranormal folklore. Hello, new listeners. Thank you for joining us here on Luckily Cryptids and Critters. We are delighted to have you, and we are very excited to start this new project we're working on, and we ask all of your patience as we sort of muddle our way through these initial days of figuring out how we want the project to go. So thank you all for joining us. The purpose of this first episode we're doing is just give y'all a little bit of introduction to us, and a little bit of an introduction on what to expect from the show moving forward. So, with that said, I will pass it over to my esteemed co-host, Loki, to do a brief introduction about themselves.
Hi, my name's Loki. My pronouns are he and they. I was an anthropology major at University of California, Los Angeles. I also majored in Scandinavian languages and cultures. So I speak a little bit of Norwegian, and I can read a little bit of Old Norse. I used to know how to translate runes, but that has since gone by the wayside. I could probably figure it out again if I wanted to pick it up, but yeah, I've always just kind of been interested in the creepy things, the spooky things, the things that go bump in the night. That was one of the things that I wanted to do with my anthropology degree, was look into like folklore and cryptids and stuff like that. But yeah, with a specific focus on Nordic cultures specifically. That's kind of everything about me that's necessary, I think. What about you, Lee?
Hi, everybody. I am Lee. I have a background in social and religious history. I studied Russian religious history at Eastern Kentucky University in Richmond, Kentucky. I have a pretty good understanding of reading in Russian. I can read Russian fairly well. Once upon a time, I was a PhD candidate for about 5 minutes with the University of Kentucky, specializing in Russian folklore and superstition. So in addition to that sort of quasi-academic background in Russian folklore and mythology, I'm a native of Kentucky. Spent a lot of time in eastern Kentucky and in the woods around that area. And I've always been fascinated with cryptids and monsters and ghoulies and things that go bump in the night. That interest sort of started very early with monster movies, right? I've always been a fan of creature features. So that starts to lead into my academic work. And then now, with Loki here, I've got a little bit of an opportunity to sort of flex those muscles again and look into things and talk about these monsters as much as I want, right? So the way we're going to plan this moving forward, the purpose of the podcast is because both of us, being friends through the internet for a couple of years now, we both have this mutual shared interest, and we both have this shared academic background, one of us coming from the anthropological perspective, the other coming from the history perspective, and us each covering sort of different areas of the world. We thought it would make an interesting place for us to sort of trade off and talk about different cryptids and get some of these ideas expressed. So, as we move forward, we're looking at talking about cryptids in a couple of different ways. Loki, do you want to tell them a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we're looking to talk about cryptids, like not only from an anthropological perspective, but also from like a social perspective, how they work their way into pop culture. Like specifically, the areas that I'm going to be covering is Nordic mythology, so like Draugr and Nisse and things like that, as well as Mesoamerican mythology. So our first episode is going to be my episode. It's going to be La Llorona. I'm covering those two topics because I have the academic background in Norse culture and cryptids, but I am also of Mexican descent, so I'm covering the cryptids in Mesoamerica to kind of claim back my culture. I feel like I was a little robbed of my culture by American assimilationism, so I am trying to reach back into the past and connect myself to my Mexican heritage through this podcast. Is there anything else you want to add, Lee?
Beautiful, beautiful. So for me, my areas of specialty being both Russian folklore, which I have no heritage in the Russian connection, but as for Appalachian folklore, the creatures and critters that crawl through the mountains and the hills and the caves and the trees, those are sort of in my blood in the same way that Mesoamerican stuff sits with Loki. Those things are really a part of my identity. But because of the way the modern world is and the way, the the social climate we live in and everything gets sort of blurred together and blandized. So one of the paths for this, for me, is to help me reconnect with those traditions in my Appalachian blood, which can sort of get lost, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we're primarily interested in, Loki can feel free to correct me if you think I'm wrong. I think from our perspective, we are much more interested in why people believe in these things, what these beliefs do for them in their societies and their cultures, and how those things get interpreted over time. So rather than hearing us talk about whether or not Bigfoot exists and what the evidence for Bigfoot is, you'll hear us talk about the history of belief in Bigfoot, how that belief has changed in the popular mind, especially through the lens of pop culture, video games, movies, comic books, music. And then you'll hear us talk about why Bigfoot is important to people, why Bigfoot occupies that place in the social consciousness. Does that track for you, Loki? Does that sound about right for the people?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, and I also wanted to. This is kind of off topic, but I also wanted to specifically state, like, as we are working with some creatures that maybe have been co-opted by organizations that we don't necessarily agree with, we would like to state that, this is an anti-fascist space, this is a pro-worker space, this is pro-LGBT space. I myself am transgender and gay. And yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know what else to say.
No, that's perfect, and this helps because we want to talk about like what the listeners should expect for, right? What y'all should
Yeah.
expect is this podcast is going to be gay as hell. I myself am either bisexual or pansexual. I'm near 30 years old and haven't figured it out. So both your hosts are queer, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to get a queer perspective on these things, and in addition to that, but you can probably tell from hearing us talk and the mention of pro-worker and anti-fascist. This is a space where we believe that Black Lives Matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a space where we stand against police brutality and oppression in as many ways
Mm-hmm.
as we can. And I know that we may have the odd listener out there that is like, I wish you all would shut up and talk about monsters and not mention politics. But I would point you to Guillermo del Toro, who will tell you that every single monster is political, right? The purpose of conjuring a monster in the social anthropological mind. The reason we humans make up monsters is actually political in the first place. You can't separate the two, right? If you look at the Phantom of the Opera is a political allegory for fear of the outsider, right? It goes all the way back to the blood of monsters. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that we may have people who want to listen to this to get away from things. And to a degree, you can, but I also want you to understand that we are looking at these topics from the lens of why they matter. And the answer to that question is often contentious,
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable, and political by nature, if that makes sense for you.
Exactly. So we're not going to shy away from any kind of political discussions if they come up, and we are on the far left side of the political spectrum. So if that's not your bag, you're probably not going to enjoy listening to us.
Now, that said, I don't want you to expect us to come in here and yell at you or beat you over the head or anything. Our focus will be kept on the topics we've discussed. It's all about our monsters, our cryptids, our critters, and how they fit into that narrative. We live in this world, and these cryptids exist in this world at least as ideas within people's mind, and that means something for us, right? And that's where we're going to direct all of our energy, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, like in the first episode with La Llorona, you're probably going to get some discussions on brutality against women and violence against women and violence against children, those kinds of discussions. But you're also going to get the, oh yeah, she's a spooky ghost story that's meant to keep children away from bodies of water so they don't drown at night.
Right, and it's the exact same from the Russian perspectives. So many of the Russian myths are going to have been changed by communism, especially over time,
Mm-hmm.
or on the resurgence of capitalism and the way Russia is transformed today. They're going to be transformed by that, or especially in the Appalachian region. In the Appalachian region, we'll end up getting into a lot of pro-worker politics because you can't separate unionism and coal mining. You can't separate those things from the Appalachian cryptids. They're one and the same, right? So that's sort of the direction you'll see from this, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't have anything off the top of my head. I know our first episode is going to be La Llorona. Our
Mm-hmm.
second episode will be on. I'm not exactly sure what to call it yet. Right now, I'm calling it cave voices, but it's basically the phenomenon of hearing things in the wilderness in Appalachia.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, we've got a slew of episodes ready to go. Some of our episodes will focus on specific creatures or specific mythological figures, and others will focus on more themes. As we mentioned earlier, you can probably expect an episode sometime in the near future on queerness and cryptids as
Mm-hmm.
a topic in itself.
And why so many queers love cryptids.
Right. Well, so yeah. We're called fairies, right? So there's gonna be a strong connection there for us for sure. So the way you can expect our episodes to go is we will have a theme or a specific monster to talk about, and we'll get into the historical, social, political, and pop culture aspects of that monster. And along the way, we'll be making jokes. We'll be diving into themes. We'll be asking each other questions because the way this will basically work is Loki will research their specialty, and I will not for that episode. So that
Mm-hmm.
way, I come in as sort of a surrogate for the listener, where I can interject, ask questions, things like that, and help build out context, and then vice versa whenever I go. Right.
Yep.
All right. Now that said, Loki, is there anything else you would like the people to know before we kill it?
No, I don't think so. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you all. We love you all, and we will see you real soon with a scary story from the dark.
Thanks so much for listening. If you want to support us, you can make a one-time donation on Acast using the Acast supporter feature, or you can make a monthly donation at ko-fi.com/luckilycryptids, all one word.
We'd also appreciate if you could follow this show on Twitter at Luckily Cryptids, all one word.
Podcast is edited by Alex Wimmer, who also composed the theme song. You can find them on Twitter or Bandcamp as Woke Up Fuzzy, all one word.
Our logo art is by Extinct Inks, and you can find their work at extinctinks.net.
You can find Loki Thursdays through Saturdays at twitch.tv/Desert Trash Opossum, all one word, or on Twitter as Desert Trash Poss, 2 S's, all one word.
And you can find Lee on Twitter at InkNerd, INKT Nerd, all one word.